सर ओपन है यस
Okay.
सर ये माउस इधर कर इससे ये नहीं मिल पा रहा
बस ठीक है दस मिनट है Let's restart our discussion. So I hope as far as the fitting of the model is concerned, is it clear?
Yes, sir.
How to fit it? You have two ways. Either to use the point and click interface, like go to statistics, open up that area, this one. Like one way is to just go to statistics, come over here and click this linear regression, and in this box, as you can see here, from the list, choose the dependent variable, which in a given case is price, and then from this list choose the required number of independent variables, click OK, and you will get the output. Okay. The alternate is, which we will be doing most of the time later on, is to use the command window rather than this one, because this later on would become a little bit time consuming. So we can just use this reg followed by the list of variables, which will be exactly the same. Like for example, from the variable window you can just click the variables, but the first variable you should click after reg should be price, and then like mpg, headroom, and trunk, weight, length, turn, displacement, and gear ratio, and then click enter. Okay, this result is not appropriate. हाँ थोड़ा सा इस हाँ इसको ज़रा सेट कर ले, रेजोल्यूशन का इशू है मेरा ख्याल में, इसको आप हाँ एग्जैक्टली ड्रैग इट ओवर हियर, नहीं लेकिन ये स्क्रीन रेजोल्यूशन भी आपको चेंज करना पड़ेगा मेरा ख्याल में. इफ यू जस्ट इसको आप मिनिमाइज कर लें, इसको मिनिमाइज करके आप डेस्कटॉप की रेजोल्यूशन में जाएं, यहाँ पे देखिए, if I minimize here and go to display setting, I don't know कि ये अब कौन सा होगा. now it is right. Okay. So this is how you get the output. This is the command. When you give this command, you will get this result of the outcome. Remember, the Stata will give you output in two parts. This is what I usually call the macro picture, and this is what I call the micro picture. Okay? In a loose sense, not necessarily in the technical sense, but just in the sense of analogy. Why I call it the macro picture and the micro picture? Because this will give you the overall picture. The purpose of the first portion of the output is to tell you whether the model on the whole is okay or not. Whether the model that you have fitted is significant or not. Okay? If the model on the whole is significant, then you would say, okay, let me see what are the individual details of the model, right? So this portion will lead you to this. Remember, if the result in the first portion is telling you that the model is not significant, there is no need to come down over here. Although your fitted model is here, remember the numbers below this word coefficient, this is actually the fitted model. Okay? Like for example, you can consider price as your y variable and these variables as your x variables. Like MPG can be x1, headroom can be considered as x2, so on and so forth. And these are those coefficients. These are those beta heads. This column is like the beta head vector. Using the matrix notation, when I said you can get the whole vector at once. So actually this whole column under the coefficient is that beta head vector. The last value in this column, this against the cons, underscore cons, this is for constant. Constant is a Stata name for the intercept. So this 12675.28, this is like beta naught head. Okay? So this is beta naught head, and the other coefficients are the coefficients associated with the x variables. So for example, if this is x1, then this is beta 1 head. If this is x2, then this is beta 2 head, so on and so forth. So this portion of the result is actually giving you what? The fitted model. But as I'm telling you, before you can come over here and you say, okay, let me explain the fitted model and let me say what the model is telling me, the important thing is that leave this thing for the time being. First look at the first portion, because the first portion will be actually telling you this portion. This first portion, which is giving you an ANOVA table and then the related results, this will be actually telling you whether it is worth to look at the detailed results of the model or not. So if that gives you the green signal, then you should come down. If that gives you the red signal, like stop, then there is no need to waste your energies and look at a model which is not useful, which is not a good fit model. समझ रहे हैं आप ना? So therefore the importance of the first portion is really very. In statistics terminology we say that there are two types of hypotheses which are tested in this particular thing. Let me write down the names of those hypotheses. The first hypothesis is what we call hypothesis in GLRM. Whether you use the word GLRM or whether you use the word multiple linear regression model, both means the same thing. Clear है ना? But because I just use the word GLRM, तो हो सकता है आपको इतना कोई मसला ना. Otherwise, GLRM means what? Multiple linear regression model. There are two hypotheses. The first one and the second one. The first hypothesis, which is being tested here, is called hypothesis of overall significance. Hypothesis of overall significance. The second one is hypothesis of individual significance. So the difference is between these two words, overall and individual. The first portion here is giving you answer for the first one, and the second portion is giving you answer for the second one. So you should be very clear what is the meaning of overall significance and what is the meaning of individual significance. Overall significance means that forget about the individual variables for the time being. Forget about what is the individual effect of MPG on price. What is the individual effect of headroom on price. Consider all of them as one group, right? The 8 explanatory variables, यहाँ पे जो आपने 8 explanatory variables दिए हैं, what is their joint effect on Y? What is the joint effect of these 8 X variables on price of a car, right? Irrespective of कि किसका ज़्यादा है किसका कम है, फिलहाल उसको छोड़ दो. Yeah. What is the joint effect of all these 8 explanatory variables together on the price of a car? In a sense, we are trying to say what these 8 explanatory variables are telling you together about the price of a car. Are they telling you something significant about the price of a car or not? Right? Or in the language of statistics, we say that the fitted model consisting of these 8 explanatory variables, whether that fitted model is significant or not. Okay? If the answer is yes, it means these 8 explanatory variables are telling you something about price of a car. If the answer is no, it means they are not telling you anything about the price of a car. So naturally you are interested in a yes answer. So the first hypothesis being tested by this model, by this portion of the output, is telling you answer about this first question, whether the fitted model is significant or not. Okay? So the null hypothesis here is what? Fitted model is insignificant. Okay? Because you know, by definition in statistics, null hypothesis always stand for no effect, no relationship, no difference. ये आपने पढ़ा है ना पहले कि what you call the null hypothesis, which is always tested by a statistical test, right? Whenever we talk about hypothesis testing, remember in hypothesis testing in statistics, we are testing a particular null hypothesis. Null hypothesis is the opposite of a research hypothesis. If the research hypothesis says that there is an effect, the null hypothesis का statement क्या होगा? There is no effect. So our research hypothesis in the given case is that the 8 explanatory variables are telling us something significant about the price of a car. So the null hypothesis would be opposite to that. Null hypothesis कहेगा कि there is these 8 variables have nothing to do with the price of a car. Or in simple words, we are trying to say that the fitted model is insignificant. समझ रहे हैं ना? Language can be different, but the meaning remains the same. The null hypothesis is saying that the fitted model is insignificant. जिसका मतलब क्या होगा? That the 8 explanatory variables are not significantly telling you anything about the price of a car. Your interest is to reject this hypothesis. If this hypothesis is rejected, इसका अल्टरनेट क्या है? At least one x variable is significant. Null hypothesis क्या कहता है? No x variable is significant. The whole model is insignificant. Alternate इसका क्या है? At least one x variable is significant. अगर एक भी significant हो तो फिर आप इसको reject नहीं कर सकते, right? So therefore, the first portion is actually testing the null hypothesis of no significance. No significance of what? No significance of all the variables. या जिसका alternate मतलब ये है कि no significance of the model. So therefore, what it is doing, it is using an ANOVA approach, as you can see here. The sum of square for the model, the sum of square for the residual. Residual is representing everything other than the model, other than the x variables. Then it is calculating the mean square, which is simply the SS divided by the degrees of freedom. This number is the mean square for the model, which is an estimate of the variance. This number is the mean square for the residue, right? By the way, this number, ये जो आपको नजर आ रहा है ना, sum of square for the residue, this is actually RSS, residual sum of square, right? So when you divide each of these SS by the corresponding degrees of freedom, which is determined by a formula, you get these numbers. What this test does, this overall significance, it uses an F ratio, which is mean square for model divided by mean square for residue. It is the ratio of these two numbers. This F ratio, which is given over here, because the first portion is telling you that you are using data on 74 cars, which means your n, your sample size is 74. The second number is telling you that the F ratio, which is just the ratio of these two numbers, this number, which is representing the mean square for the model, divided by this number, which is the mean square for the residue, right? This F ratio is used as a test statistic. And the answer to this one, this 38049550.7 divided by this number, 508721.5.24, this gives you what? 7.48. And then it calculates a p-value. This is a Stata way of representing a p-value, probability greater than f. This number, represented by p greater than f, this is p-value associated with this test. And using the p-value rule, which says that if the p-value is less than 0.05, then you will reject the null hypothesis. Okay? The usual p-value approach says that whenever the p-value associated with a test is less than 5%, less than 0.05, this is a universally used rule, irrespective of the type of test, चाहे आप t-test use कर रहे हैं या f-test use कर रहे हैं. Whenever the computed p-value is less than 0.05, this is an evidence against H0. This is an evidence against the null hypothesis. So null hypothesis would always be rejected if the computed p-value is less than 0.05. Now what is the computed p-value here? Exactly 0. Exact 0 का मतलब क्या है? In layman language it means that there is a 0% chance that the null hypothesis of no significant model can be true. 0% chance का मतलब क्या है? No chance, right? So therefore, on the basis of this p-value, we reject the null hypothesis. Which null hypothesis? The null hypothesis that the model is insignificant. No x variable is significant. That is rejected. So rejection of the null hypothesis here, or in other words, a significant result in this part is necessary in order to come down to the next. याद रहेगा? A significant result here is a green signal to look at the details of the model. Why? Because when the null hypothesis of no significance is rejected, it means that at least one of the x variable is significant. फिर आप ये देखना चाहेंगे कि okay, if at least one x variable is significant, then let me check which x variable is significant. Is it the case that all of them are significant with regard to the price of a car? Or is it the case that some of them are significant? लेकिन ये सिग्नल आपको कहाँ से मिलेगा? यहाँ से मिलेगा. अगर यहाँ पे ये p value 0.05 से ज़्यादा होता, उसका फिर दूसरा conclusion होता ना. If the p value was more than 0.05, then that would mean that the null hypothesis is not rejected. Or null hypothesis का मतलब क्या है? The model is insignificant. The fitted model is insignificant, which means that don't waste your time with this model. Although you have fitted the model, but this model is not going to tell you that much about the price of a car. So if the model is not going to tell you that much about the price of a car, why you would come down and look at the details of the model? समझ गए आपने? So therefore, a significant result here is a green signal to come down to this next part. An insignificant result here is a red signal, stop. Don't move. तो सबसे पहले आपने क्या देखना होता है? That the significant result should be here. Because only a significant result justifies that you can look at the rest of the results. अगर unfortunately आपके पास यहाँ पे insignificant result आ जाता है, तो उसका मतलब क्या होगा? You are just wasting your time. You are looking at a model which is insignificant. आप ऐसे model को क्यों explain करना चाहेंगे जो आपको कह रहा है कि it is not telling you anything about your dependent variable. So therefore, this is the first step that you should look. The other information which for the time being you can just look at, although we can discuss it in detail later on, is this number, r square. Remember, r square is also somehow telling you how much out of, in a sense, technically, how much out of 1 is the contribution of these included x variables.
Is it explained variables?
Yeah, explain. How much the included explanatory variables explain regarding the dependent variable, right? How much the included explanatory variable contribute towards explaining the dependent variable, right? How much is the contribution of the included explanatory variables towards explaining the nature of the dependent variable? This number is telling you that. In order to make it easy for interpretation, you would always multiply it with 100. Although the original range of r square is between 0 and 1, यानी 1 से ज़्यादा नहीं हो सकता और 0 से कम नहीं हो सकता. But to make it easier for interpretation, you will multiply this number with 100, and then the interpretation would be out of 100 rather than out of 1, right? So if you multiply this number with 100, what you will get? 47.93%, which is something like 48%. So it is telling you that 48% of the total variations in price are due to these 8 explanatory variables, right? These 8 explanatory variables that you have included in a model, MPG, headroom, up to gain ratio. These 8 variables together explain 48% approximately of the variations in the price of a car, which means the remaining 52% are because of other factors, right? Although we would like this r square to be as high as possible, but in the context of the model, we would give more importance to the results of this F test, okay? So although this r square is not that desirable, because we would like this r square to be usually more than 0.8, which means 80% or more, would be a very ideal r square. But because we want to determine whether this fitted model is going to tell us something about the dependent variable or not, so the answer is given here by the F test. And that is telling you that yes, it is telling you something like that. So after you get a significant result here, you then come down and you look at the remaining results. This one. So this portion of the model is giving you the results of your fitted model, right? And remember, as long as these variables are quantitative, which in the given case are quantitative, these numbers would represent change in y corresponding to a unit change in the corresponding x, right? What is y? Price. And x can be one of them. So like for example, this minus 106 point something corresponding to MPG is telling you what? It is telling you that for 1 unit increase in MPG, the average price of the car comes down by $106, right? Corresponding to 1 additional unit, whatever is the unit of MPG, corresponding to 1 extra 1 unit increase in MPG, the price decreases by, why I'm using the word decreases? Because of a negative sign, right? Similarly, if you look at the weight, it is plus something, plus 4.85. So a plus sign shows direct relationship, a negative sign shows inverse relationship. So this plus 4.85 means what? That corresponding to a 1 unit increase in weight, if weight of the car increases by 1 more additional unit of weight, whatever, for example pound, for 1 additional 1 pound increase in the weight of the car, the price of the car increases by this much, right? So corresponding to every 1 additional unit of weight, the price of the car increases by $4.8, something like that. So positive means corresponding to 1 unit increase, it increases by that much. Negative, corresponding to 1 unit increase, the price decreases by that much. So all these numbers represent increase or decrease in price corresponding to a unit increase in these variables. Okay? And then the coefficient divided by standard error, the ratio of these two will give you the T ratio. And coefficient divided by standard error, right? T is simply coefficient divided by standard error, right? These numbers, if you got the T ratio, they are obtained by simply dividing the number in the coefficient by the associated standard error, and you get what? The T ratio. And these T ratios then test the second hypothesis. Hypothesis of individual significance. Hypothesis of individual significance means that whether the individual effect of a particular x variable is significant or not. पहले में आप individual की बात नहीं कर रहे थे, वहाँ पे आप सबका एक joint कह रहे थे. What is the joint effect? Now you are taking them one by one. So in a sense, each line is telling you what is the effect of the corresponding x variable. And remember, in all of them, the null hypothesis is that of no effect. Like for example, corresponding to MPG, which hypothesis is tested? There is no effect of MPG on price of a car. Whether MPG increases or decreases, it has no effect on the price of a car. Price has nothing to do with the MPG of a car. This is the null hypothesis, right? And the same is the case. So for all of them, the null hypothesis is that of no effect. This T ratio with associated p-value, again using the same p-value rule, will tell you whether the effect is significant or not. So any p-value here, which is less than 0.05, would mean that the null hypothesis of the corresponding variable is rejected. The null hypothesis of no effect is rejected. And you will conclude that there is a significant effect of that x variable on the price of a car, right? So for example, if you look at this list, which p-value is less than 0.05? This one, which corresponds to weight. This one, which corresponds to turn. And this one, which corresponds to gear ratio. 3 of the p-values are less than 0.05, while the rest are all greater than 0.05. So you can say that out of these 8 variables, 3 of them has a significant effect on the price of a car. Which 3 of them? Weight, turn, and gear ratio. Okay? Or in more statistical language, we can say that at 5% level of significance, these three variables have a significant effect. Why? Because we are comparing it with 5%. Okay? Because the p-value is less than 5, which is the usual standard. So therefore, we would say that although the initial part of the model was telling us that at least one of the variable has a significant effect, this portion is now particularly telling us which variable has significant effect and which variable has an insignificant effect. So now we come to the conclusion that if the first part was telling you that some of the variables have a significant effect, but you were not very clear, what does it mean? Is it about all of them or is it about some of them? Now the picture is clear that MPG has not a significant effect. The same is the case with headroom, the same is the case with trunk. Weight, turn, and gear ratio has a significant effect on the price of a car. So at the end of the day, if you want to point out what are the significant predictors of the price of a car, then according to this model, they are weight, turn, and gear ratio. Although for the time being, I'm not saying that this is the final model that we should go for, because there are a number of checks, the number of other steps that we have to learn before we can finally say whether we should use this model or whether we should improve it, because this model has to be checked for many issues. जिस तरह आप किसी product को market देखने से पहले क्या करते हैं? You check it. You send it to the quality control department. They run different tests, and after they clear it, then you send the product to the market. इस तरह होता है ना? So therefore, at this stage, we cannot be very conclusive whether this is the model that we should finally use, but at least this is how we can interpret the results of the given model, right? Later on, we would learn a number of other steps which we can apply on this fitted model, and then we would come to a conclusion whether we should do something with this model or whether we should use it as it is, okay? But this is, for the time being, just fitting the initial model, trying to interpret the results. Like just a minute ago, you should start from there. That would justify whether you can come over here or not, right? That part would either tell you stop or go ahead, okay? A significant result over there means go ahead. Insignificant result over there means stop. Once there is a go ahead, then you can come over here. You can not only explain the meaning of these coefficients, but you can also explain the corresponding results of the hypothesis testing from this portion. Okay, which variable is significant and which variable is insignificant, right? This is so far that we can learn about fitting a model. Okay?
सर ये पेपर में आप यही इस तरह का मॉडल देंगे?
Yeah, exactly.
सर पेपर में हमें कुछ कंप्यूट करना होगा या इंटरप्रिटेशन?
No. You will be given a direct output.
And we will be required to go for the interpretation.
Yeah, exactly. Interpretation. ठीक है? बेहतर तो ये जिस तरह एक participant ने कहा कि you just actually do it. लेकिन वो मैं आपको assignment में दूंगा ना?
सर अगर इसी तरह दे दें तो बेहतर होगा।
जी, assignment में।
सर मिड टर्म में अगर आप दे दें,
सर अगर मिड आप दे दें तो फाइनल में हम खुद ही सीख
टास्क बता दें तो सीखेंगे।
assignment आपको separate मिलेगा उसके लिए।
अच्छा।
Okay.
वो तो मिलेगा।
सर ये डिस्क्रिप्टिव से आप प्रोग्राम
सेट टी वैल्यू और एफ वैल्यू का कोई रोल
Yes sir.
सेट टी वैल्यू
हाँ, T और F का आपस में relationship है। You know this T square.
सर मैं मत सेंड
the magnifier చెప్తాను